Please be aware this video will discuss spoilers for Dawntrail through patch 7.3. If you haven't played yet and want to preserve the moment, best click away now. My content is very sacrilegious. Well, Dawntrail 7.3 definitely turned a few heads, and from the little I've seen online, a fair amount of divisiveness. You have some thinking this story arc is a sign Square Enix is getting back on track after Dawntrail's abominable borehole of a launch. We have new villains in the works, a magic key that can bullshit us just about anywhere the writers want us to, and Zodiac willing, Wuklama is out of the narrative for good. I can't lie, that is the best gift FF14 players could have asked for. On the other hand, you got people like yours truly, who's taken a step back and recognized that many of the problems we've been on about over the last year haven't really been resolved so much as lightly paved over. Nonsensical plot points remain outstanding, shortchanging character development while forcing others to the forefront for all of 5 minutes before they're killed off. But the biggest flop was Calyx himself, the newly introduced main antagonist, painted as emotionless, logical, and singularly focused. He was the behind-the-scenes orchestrator, the true threat all along, and then 7.3 turned him into a cliché 80s cartoon villain. Dumb strategies that are needlessly complicated and resource-consuming, failed plots that would make G1 Megatron from Transformers laugh in disbelief. Honestly, they did just about everything possible to make this guy a joke, depleting the very tension, the fear an enemy should invoke in us if we're meant to take them seriously. You know, I hate it when they introduce a smart, logic-oriented character who starts acting dumb for the sake of the plot. I understand creating unique counters for a smart villain is difficult, but the payoff is something to revel at. Dawntrail's writers opted to not do that, but instead have Calyx make mistake after mistake, so much that it destroys any notion this guy even knows what he's doing. But let's recap real quick and discuss the outstanding problems. In 7.0, Robosphere was all over the place. She embraced us as friends rather quickly and seemed to conspire with us to stop Zorolja's warpath. This takes a twist, not really, when she inevitably sides with him after helping us sneak into Alexandria, giving us vital information on its workings, compromising their plans. More on that shortly. Then after we killed the daddy issue supervillain, because that is the sum total of his freaking character, Sphinx swings by to steal the key back, return to living memory, where she begins initiating the fusing of our realities. The less said about our travels around living memory, the better. It was hands down the worst final zone in the entire 14 series. Anyways, after our boss fight, she hands us the key before getting deleted. The end.
That was pretty dramatic.
Calyx's inclusion was meant to be the binding that made all the confusing elements in Sphinx and Zorol's actions click. He wanted the key and so manipulated Robosphere to acquire it and sustain the Endless, including himself, and the fusing would gain him access to all the ether he'd need for an indefinite period. Indeed, being controlled by a hidden party does forgive 7.0 Sphinx for some of her actions, giving us the key for example. Now, a small correction on my part from our 7.3 review, link included below, I was skeptical of how Calyx just so happened to lose control at a pivotal moment like this, especially since everything we see of the man portrays someone meticulous in his schemes. It would never let a single action occur that didn't serve his ultimate goal. A couple people in the comments mentioned, however, that the key seems to respond to the wishes and prayers of those around it. Their hopes, their determination, is apparently vital in activating the key's power. So Calyx was required to make Robosphere as close to her original as possible to match its criterion. Thinking on it some more, I can set aside my skepticism and mostly buy this explanation. It also accounts for why the second fake Sphinx is so much closer to his side and significantly crueler in personality. He wanted to ensure she didn't wiggle free again, so that's one less problem. Unfortunately, that only spawns additional issues we don't get answers to.
Stop the fucking presses.
I understand Sphinx, but why Zorol? Following this reason, his inclusion is counterproductive. He's not driven by hopes or wishes. He's pure malice and indignation over not earning his father's approval. Assaulting Turol was his way of getting that validation, and up to his death, he's the one possessing the key. Now, at the time, we figured it was his bargaining chip to ensure Alexandria kept its word giving him an army, but now we know Calyx was the one controlling things. Why keep Zorol? He barely leads the troops into battle, so his leadership skills mean little. Being so narrowly focused on his ambitions, it could be Zorol was easy to manipulate. But as we saw numerous times, Zorol was notoriously unbalanced. Someone like that would be detrimental to Calyx's precise calculations. Why not remove him once a key was in Alexandrian hands? We've seen Calyx erase everybody's memories via the regulators, so removing Zoral should have been easy, and nobody in Solution 9 would be wiser to him ever even existing. And without that obstacle, he could follow through with the fusing as we see Sphene do in Living Memory. While we took pointless boat rides, enacted horrible plays, explore a volcano museum, and ride flying capybaras, while there's a doomsday clock ticking dead center of the map. God, I hated this so much. Anyways, this creates a whole new debacle I don't think Square has any intention of addressing. If Robo-Sphene possessing the key was enough to kickstart a full fusion, which seemed to be what she was doing at the tail end of 7.0, then why not remove Zoral to begin with and skip right to this part? Nothing gets provided from the moment Zoral makes contact with Alexandria and Sphene claiming the key after his death that could have changed the formula. Certainly not where Calyx is concerned. They already commenced a partial fusing when the dome appeared in Shaloni, so what was preventing the full fusion from taking place? The only answer we had for this was Zoral holding onto the key, but he was never in control. Some claims suggest Calyx doesn't know how to use the key to its full effects, yet they seem able to use it enough to advance the plot. Why could only a minor fusing happen, but not a full one? Why wait to commence the full fusion when Calyx could have done so anytime once the key was back in his possession? Robo-Sphene poses the only known obstacle. She was rather timid about instigating war, letting her people down, so much that she decides to erase her own personality at Living Memory as the fusing prepares. One could argue this, along with Calyx not wanting to push her too far, lest her personality slip and compromise the plan, is why most events throughout Solution 9 went the route that they did. Like I said, I get it, but that's stretching our disbelief mighty thin. The fact Robo-Sphene agrees to Zoral's demands, spent decades building up their forces readying for the assault. She had plenty of resolve beforehand when it came to the sacrifice of innocence. I know accepting something terrible and seeing it unfold are very different. She might have caved after seeing the slaughter firsthand. Then again, she turns right around and stands by Zoral during the second assault, allowing the mayhem to commence anyway, even though nothing had happened that would change her decision. I don't believe for an instant our presence played any part in influencing her, so what the hell was even the point of us getting involved?
I know we brought you along for a reason, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it is.
This has been driving me batshit since 7.0 wrapped up. Why did Sphene reach out to us? She greets us shortly after accessing the dome, plays nice with us, gives us access to Solution 9 proper. She seemed keen on circumventing Zoral's influence to avoid further Alexandrian bloodshed. Hell, she even thanks us after his death for ending a potential threat to her people. Yet, seeing the threat he was, she still stood by him until, surprise surprise, he went apeshit and everything reset, making this one of the lamest twists the writers could have gone with. Let's not forget that ultimately, Calyx was in control of all of this. And to date, the only instance he's admitted a lack of influence over her was right at her death when she hands us the key. So was all this part of his so-called master plan? Was he using us to remove Zoral for him, as he was a useless tool? That doesn't make sense. We already mentioned how he can erase memories, and he was in control of the drones too, everything needed to remove Lizard Stalin from the situation himself. Including us only complicated matters. Even an egotist could see this was counterproductive. So was this Sphene acting without his consent, luring the enemy into his domain, forging friendships, eliciting our help when Zoral turns on Alexandria? In fact, was that part of Calyx's plan? I know he cares nothing for these people, but how did slaughtering Alexandrians advance any of his goals? Zoral wound up consuming all those additional souls Calyx needed to sustain the Endless. That was blatantly contrary to his desires. Was he using Zoral to stop us? Then why were we allowed to enter Everkeep to begin with if he wanted to eliminate us? Not to mention Zoral's death allowed Galulja to assume the title of king. He's the one who strips the drones of their weapons, making it more difficult for Calyx to harm people. Which, if Calyx is in control, why the hell would he allow that to happen? Galul's interference was a problem that Calyx, with all his machinations, should have been able to avoid. And he just didn't. Perhaps this is an obscure mixture of Sphene operating outside of his control and him forcibly acting to reclaim said control. But that's just mix-matching explanations when and where it suits a situation rather than a coherent narrative we're meant to take seriously. That is not storytelling. That is not acceptable.
What the hell is going on here? You know what? I honestly have no idea what's going on.
Calyx was meant to be the mastermind that explains everything in Dawntrail, and all we have is a massive contradiction so enormous, piling them all into this video would make it collapse into a black hole from which no narrative reasoning could escape. Whichever direction we go in, there's a problem. If Calyx orchestrated things, it's counter to his goals. Or if Sphene had broken free of her programming beforehand, which means Calyx had a psycho fembot on his hands and allowed her to continue operating despite making decisions that were, again, contrary to his ambitions. None of this logically follows in the slightest. The only other potential explanation is that Calyx was on low power mode or some bullshit, leaving the system on autopilot while he awaited the key's return. That could excuse RoboScreen's wayward behavior and maybe even Zoral's actions. In Final Fantasy XVI, Ultima had done something like that, creating humanity then taking a power nap. Humans gained sentience and free will during those centuries. In fact, these stupid-ass events may well have forced Calyx to wake up and retake control of everything. 400 years is a long time. I'm sure the guy got bored on occasion. This would be very convenient for the plot. And as mentioned, nothing out of the ordinary with a Final Fantasy game. The issue is, 1. When he explains how Sphene broke from his control, Calyx makes it sound as though he's kept active. This also means Calyx had the key back in his possession after 400 years, and didn't have an alarm go off letting him know that he had the key in his possession after 400 years, and still had the whole system run on autopilot, despite having absolutely everything he needed to enact his plans. That would be astronomically stupid of him, and not the least bit out of character, to be frank. This is the other part of the conversation we need to have. Calyx's actions have been remarkably retarded. That is just the stuff we witness for ourselves. No theories or implications, just facts. The complete mess that was 7.0 can't be understated. That was his rodeo, and he let the animals bulldoze through the fucking crowd. We're not letting that go. To keep this video from dragging out, let me point out the single mistake he made that derailed this entire patch, where he exposes his data core, his exact location, to the enemy, putting himself in a very vulnerable position. I cannot put into words how stupid this was, how senseless, how pointless, how much it hurt my fucking brain that this is how the writers opted to reach this conclusion. Calyx's single greatest advantage was his data core security. He essentially had free reign to keep hounding us over and over until he either defeated us or we relented. It was a battle of attrition, which is exactly what he did with Necron's summoning, so we can't pretend he was too dumb or arrogant not to consider the tactical advantage of wearing us down, nor that of the enemy not being able to touch you. It's a real-life save icon. No matter how many times you mess up, you can start again with a new strategy. It's literal game mechanics within the game, and they messed it up. Fucking Square. And of course, it ended badly for him, an absolute shock to absolutely nobody. Now, Shale had found a way to track Calyx down. You could argue that he simply cut out the middleman and invited us on in with his trap already in motion. That would be a good idea if it weren't for the fact that he can move his consciousness to other data centers. He could find another location to hide, which in a place like Solution 9, he's bound to have multiple options for transfer. We have seen he has various labs and operation posts. It is illogical, especially for a man of his ability and mindset, to not have a way around this. I'm sorry folks, there's no reason for him to do this beyond the writer's whim. I mentioned arrogance a minute ago. That was the defense made by many in our 7.3 review. Calyx was overconfident in his technological prowess and calculations. He got arrogant enough to think Necron would do the trick and had no fear of exposing himself. Now, credit where it's due, Necron's resummoning after death was a nifty advantage. You know what else is a nifty advantage? Your enemy not knowing where you are. And Calyx opted to give up that advantage for no reason.
Round and round we go.
Let me give a few examples to show you guys how much easier Calyx could have handled this mess. Number 1. Cause panic throughout the city, something he's already been shown capable of doing. This will cause the heroes to spread themselves thin and leave the Warrior of Light isolated. Having Necron deal with us one-on-one makes far more sense than dealing with the whole group simultaneously. It's our prowess he expresses concern over. Focus on the biggest obstacle, and we will have no backup when shit gets real. Numero dos. Remember that doppelganger ability he used to trick Geode? You know how that didn't happen anywhere else in this patch? For no reason? Let's change that. Have a large group of drones disguised as civilians getting attacked by other drones. When we arrive to defend them, they drop the act and can even self-detonate. A multitude of explosions should at least do a number on us. Especially if caught unaware, this can at least weaken us before he summons Necron. Sanban. Give us a fake location of your data core, We had no idea where the fuckity frelin frack it is. Lying would have been easy, and it would lead us wherever best suited you. Since he can transfer his consciousness around, keeping a safe distance is also easy to accomplish. In fact, I was surprised we threw caution to the wind and infiltrated the terminal with barely any hesitation. Not even a preliminary scouting, no drones like that device Kafkawa had used. We were mighty trusting of Douchebag the Grey here. You know what all these strategies have in common? None of them have Calyx acting like a moron. What a novel concept.
Por favor, no.
Folks, when there's this many alternatives that are practical and effective, and the character chooses not to even consider them, there's something wrong with what you're doing. The blatant disregard for Dawntrail's potential is what frustrates me the most. There are easy fixes nobody will invest in. And contrary to how I may come across, I don't go out of my way to hate on stuff. I don't enjoy shitting on this game nonstop. That's bullshit, he gets off on it. You sass me again on turning your ass into a Lalafell. You wouldn't. Bitch, have you met me? In fact, I'll pin a comment down below. 150 likes and our next FF14 video, Durantes will debut as a potato. Have fun with that. If the writer struggled with how to uncover Calyx's location, that too was an easy fix. We have a sizable cast and Oblivion members like Shale and the Sakura sisters, whatever their names are. They wanted to make Oblivion relevant in this patch, so let them be relevant. Let them actually accomplish something beyond exposition. Have Shale track down the preservation lab we explored, only instead have Cryo lead that team to investigate while we tackle the enemy across the city. God forbid you assholes finally let her do something. That, along with Gululjan's authority as king, and Cryo's earring, they are able to bypass Calyx's security and pinpoint his location. If that's too much of an ass pull, then go by process of elimination. Where would be the safest place to operate from? An area barren of any population, like living memory. Better yet, it's where Sphene awoke from. That something else may be hiding inside the tower is not a stretch. They investigate and locate Calyx's memory core. It can still be shielded. Wook can tag along by this point, do her Shoten Protag thing. Voila! We largely get the same results, just without the short bus quality in writing. Now, if budget is an issue, I know Square loves cutting 14 short on the cash, maybe we could cut the ending to 7.3 short, because that stretch of story was half a mothering hour. The end of 7.0, from the trial's end to the final cutscene, was only about 20 minutes. People, Dawntrail was not important enough to merit such a lengthy conclusion. So get rid of all this excess crap. Just our reunion until the Olo, and then living memory. Use all that free time to spruce up the parts of the story that mattered. Problem solved. I would rather have a lengthy gameplay story than a needlessly drawn out conclusion like this. This was so boring. Whatever positives I had to say have been forgotten by the end due to how much time they wasted for no reason. And again, Calyx's only major defense is arrogance and overconfidence. A few also commented that he's tech-savvy, not strategy efficient. None of these can excuse such a blatant display of dumbassery. Rather than rant about it, let's look at an example within the Final Fantasy universe of a villain who was also arrogant and foolhardy, and how his actions were not incompetent to the extreme, unlike Calyx. Dear old Sephi has quite a bit in common with Calyx's goals. They both want something delivered to them, Calyx the key, Sephiroth the black materia. They operate from a hidden location that is eventually exposed, the Mesoterminal and Northern Crater respectively. They manipulate others to achieve their goals, and they are very, profoundly arrogant. But as the devil is in the details, so is the good stuff. Sephiroth may have exposed himself at the Northern Crater, letting not just our party, but the world know where he was. Like Calyx, he even magics up a barrier. However, this barrier is considerably more effective, whereas Calyx's was shattered by the power of the one true Hokage, or friendship, or some bullshit, I don't know. Sephiroth's shield required far more legwork. It wasn't even Cloud and company that tears it down. It was Shinra, the other antagonist of the game, who do that. Firing a Mako cannon powerful enough to not only kill a giant monster, but plow right on through and destroy the barrier. Midgar was the only place on the planet with the resources and power necessary to pull this off. And even then, it drained the whole city of power in the process. The odds were slim, they were racing against the clock. And all of this was being constructed while the Shinra military was deployed all over the place fighting the other weapons. It was risky exposing himself, but with this many variables in his favor, Sephiroth wasn't exactly betting against the odds. I'll also add that it needed to be the northern crater, because the vast energy flowing around there was vital to summon Meteor in the first place. So this isn't some arbitrary location. Calyx's location at the Meso Terminal was because... reasons? I suppose it being the central hub for a living memory, this would be the ideal location for an Endless. But as for exposing himself, there's no purpose. He could have led us anywhere for the Necron fight. There were alternatives to exposing himself. Much smarter alternatives.
First of all, I don't know if calling you on the phone and inviting you over, I don't know if that qualifies as an elaborate scheme.
As far as using others to achieve their goals, Calyx is all over the place in that regard. With his retinue of drones, which he could disguise to manipulate people, trick them, mislead them, he really sold short his own resources with this stupid-ass stunt. Sephi, on the other hand, Cloud had Genova cells that Sephiroth could use to control him, alter his memories, his perception. This was the perfect ruse to ensure that even should the black materia be taken, it would still wind up in his hands. And since Cloud was the one who caused him trouble years earlier, chucking his ass into the livestream, it was a bit of payback. There is arrogance in how much he revels in toying with Cloud, without a doubt, and foolhardiness. When he attempts to take control of Cloud again after the final battle, it's a last-ditch effort on Sephiroth's part after his physical form had been destroyed. Cloud had been wrapped around his finger throughout the whole game. The only difference now is, he's of sound mind. Cloud knows who he is, and he won't be played again, leading to Sephiroth's ultimate defeat. Arrogance, recklessness, not unlike Calyx, sure, but also enough insurance on his part that it's not so blatantly a risk to his endeavors. The digital douche had no such confidence. Hell, even after Sephiroth's defeat and wholly activating, it was too late to stop Meteor without additional help from the livestream itself. One of the most epic endings to a story I have ever seen. Even with 30-year-old graphics, I absolutely love it. How much do you guys want to bet that the remake part 3 will fuck this up too? The fact Calyx had been wrong about Sphene repeatedly, leading to complications in his plans, wrong about us and our strength, something he remarks on being of concern in 7.2. Wook, despise her as I may, had been vital in our fight too. Why didn't he consider her to be a viable threat? Why did he let her enter the terminal? Allowing her and us to enter his most vulnerable area was retarded, straight up. In fact, letting our allies join in the fray, which only further complicated matters, was stupid. All were errors on his part that he just kept on making again and again.
Over and over and over and over. Okay, I get it.
For no reason. He had nothing to justify being this smug. Beyond, that's just what the writers felt like doing. That is why Calyx is a failure of a villain. The amount of BS you must accept to get the desired outcome is preposterous. It is comical. The only lingering defense is that additional information in the next few patches, or perhaps the next expansion, will rectify some of this. Calyx has only had 2 patches to develop. That's not very much time. I've had similar problems with Vana and her bullshit in Endwalker. Too much we're expected to believe despite overwhelming evidence we should reject her, and not enough time to see her develop to explain most of the issues. Square keeps repeating their mistakes, and I am done waiting for things to get better, waiting for things to make sense. We've been doing that since 7.0 dropped last summer, and we're still waiting. This game doesn't have any credit left to cling to. As always, these are my thoughts. What about you guys? Do you think he'll improve with subsequent appearances, or are we getting our hopes up for nothing again? Share your own thoughts as always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Till then.